Can you confidently express yourself? Let me add to this. Can you confidently express your voice to sing, to express your emotions, your truth, regardless of what's coming out in any circumstance? I can honestly say that I can, though I'm willing to continue to courageously push my edge. And I know that my expression is so connected to my intuition, so important for my healing and my regulation, for my embodiment, my manifestation, for my presence and my experience of moving through this life in a good way. And I know that I've worked with stories that are very common. Is my voice good enough? Is it appropriate to experience and express these emotions? Is this level of truth appropriate? So in this episode, I want to share a little bit about my story as a window into my personal life to explore some of these themes and the importance of your expression. So let's go back. Let's go way back 34 years. October 13th, 1990, 10:23 to be exact. Exactly. Zach was born at this time. And my mom's first words were, "Why is he blue?" Panic. Cord wrapped around my neck. Great entry point into this life. I mean, it's how I ended my last life, but that's another story for another day. Not with my umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. But a similar situation. Anyways. Cord wrapped around the neck. So I'm connecting the cord wrapped around the neck to the fifth chakra, or our center of communication and expression, yeah? This is where it all comes from. I mean, it can come from deeper places within, but this is where it finds its expression in our manifest form in the physical, yeah? So even since birth, there was something going on there, yeah? This kind of control, contraction, strangulation feeling. And then all through my early years, very introverted, very shy. Wasn't the kind of guy who would get on the stage at an early age. Preschool plays, these kinds of things. So I stuck to the back, behind the curtains. And I continued to do that. And don't get me wrong. I got a Leo in my moon. I got an expressive nature. I got a big personality that likes to come out on occasion when I feel comfortable and safe. But because I didn't feel comfortable and safe for so much of my life, it very rarely saw the light outside of those who I was comfortable with. But as time progressed throughout my high school and later on years, I became more and more of a hermit. So those kinds of places were fewer and far between. And because I had such a love and fascination and devotion for meditation and writing and reading and learning, more and more did I find myself alone. And the part of me that was a fiery, expansive, sometimes flamboyant lion didn't find its expression for so long. And that became the norm. That became the default way of processing and experiencing life, not to find expression in that way. And that felt all right. I didn't know what I was missing until I made the change to begin to express myself and feel the resistance. And it really came to a head like 5 or 6 years ago. This is when I started to step into holding ceremonies, and this was in breath work, this was in teaching various movement systems, and very importantly, this was when I started sitting in a sweat lodge with my late elder, Vern Shanos, who eventually asked me to sit beside him and pour around. And when you pour in sweat lodge, songs are quite normal. So I was asked to sing in ceremony, which was one of the hardest places that I could imagine to sing because of my love for ceremony and wanting to keep vibrations harmonious. Because in my in my day to day, I like to break rules. I I had that part of me. I think it's good for some percent of the population to be rule breakers, a little bit divergent. It helps the whole in many ways, and I've often pushed buttons throughout my career as a human. But in ceremony, I'm very respectful and as best as I can, and I do my best not to break any rules, and I do my best to follow the traditions and to keep the energies harmonious. So the idea of expressing a voice such as mine at that time, which had no training, no capacity to keep tone or pitch, and to create such unharmonious vibrations was deeply scary. But what was really there for me was when I expressed my voice, I had to feel my body, because when I sing, my body vibrates and my consciousness moves through my system. And the lifetime of not expressing myself, I had to feel all that emotion, all that pain, and everybody else can feel it, and that's raw. Everybody else can see how afraid I am. Everybody else can feel me. So that was terrifying, and it wasn't enough to get me to do singing lessons. The fear was so gripping, and sometimes fear is like this. Sometimes fear is like the thing that terrifies us the most. We don't just take action on. I didn't just take action on it because it was like subconsciously pushing me away, like the opposite end of a magnet that's repulsive, that I would avoid it. And I touched into it a few times, but not doing the kind of work that would help me to work right through it. I would cautiously poke at it and then retract and retreat away and go, not going to look too deeply at that. But then again and again, I'm still asked to be in ceremony. I'm still asked to sing and sweat. I'm being asked more and more to step in front of people, larger and larger groups, when I share breath work. And it becomes more and more clear to me that I have a lot of anxiety around this. And it's not going to get any easier. But it's also an interesting one because I started leading a lot of breathwork circles with people that I loved and trusted. And they were enough as an anchor for my expression. And when they were there, my personality became open and free. Not so much so that I was singing, I still hadn't developed all the things, tone, pitch, that allow harmonious vibrations to come out. But my expression, I could express more of my personality, quirkiness, and ability to have confidence to look people in the eyes, to be seen and heard in this way, which was incredibly empowering and also very interesting. That when they're around, that was there, but when I would lead a circle all of a sudden on my own, I wouldn't have that anchoring, and I could completely lose myself in my anxiety. So over the years, I continued to push my edge, and some of the major areas that I've worked on is singing, expressive speaking, like in poetry, comedy, dancing, and acting. And these have all had their own unique edge of embodiment and expression for me. The most challenging for me is the singing. I'm a very kinesthetic and body-based human. and taking part in many different athletics since I was young. There's a certain amount of development in my physical in that way. And then reading poetry, I write the poetry from a deep place of emotion. And then there was this process of connecting my expression and voice back to that emotion. And that felt much more like a clear line. And acting, I find that one, once again, comes a little bit easier in the way that I'm a very physical actor. If I'm getting really into it, there's an embodiment presence in there. So that's much more clear of a line. But when it comes to singing, that has been the biggest wellspring in terms of growth. Feeling like there's the most development there for me, especially with the fifth chakra relationship between the throat strangulation and the throat piece has been such a big one for me, and it's so common, to be honest, in the world. And what I mean by that is I'm a clinical breath worker, so I deal with helping to support individuals in their breathing. And our breathing is not just about oxygen coming in and out as a more physical process. It's about the giving and receiving of energy and spirit to our human vessel. And the particular pattern that I teach is breath wave. And in this particular technique, there's an emphasis on the exhale being relaxation. Breathing continuously in this exhale having a relaxed quality, and throughout the session, throughout the hour or so, there's an opportunity with each exhale to relax and release. So beautiful, so wonderful, yeah? But what it shows us is where we're not willing to release. So as an individual is expressing, the chronic and habitual tensions or blockages in their physical and energetic system become apparent to them. And a very common block is this fifth chakra. Now there's many different reasons for this, so this isn't going to be a comprehensive talk here on that, but most of them revolve around control. And all the parts of the body, coming from the signals of the nerves in the spinal cord, basically have two major motor outputs, right? Contract and relax. Sending a signal to contract the musculature, control, or to release and relax, yeah? So the throat space for many individuals commonly has a conditioning in the motor programs as well as the deeper energies, which we'll explore momentarily, to exhibit more control in accordance with stress and when we have a lot of emotions that we're not willing to express. Particularly anger, but all emotions, yeah? Particularly anger, one, because it's very common in our society, if I'm just honest. Two, because the common pattern of anger and frustration is contraction, particularly of the fists and the jaw, the clenching in. Very common, where sadness and anxiety don't as much manifest with that jaw contraction. Though they certainly can, because stress built up in the system activates sympathetic tone, which is the more activating or contractile force in the nervous system. But it doesn't even have to be like a deep welling of suppressed emotion necessarily, though that's often deeper in the layering, because I ain't met a single human who doesn't have legacy, you could say, of suppressed emotion from their childhood, unless they've completely cleared all that, and I haven't met those humans yet. Perhaps one, but I resist that tangent. If an individual works a career where they're meant to act in a certain way, for example, I've worked as a dental hygienist for many years. I'm seen as a, let's call it a health professional, if you will. There's a certain way a health professional acts to most appropriately help the individual to feel safe in that given environment and to allow the treatment process to run most smoothly. I would say it's not my most authentic expression to act in that professional manner. So, in order to play that role, that part, I have to put on a mask and I have to act and express a certain way. Because that expression is not my authentic, spontaneous expression, it develops into a subtle or gross control pattern in my system. Now, if I was working this career a lot, that control pattern would seed itself, the contractile, I would say even suppressive pattern would build itself into the energetics. And if I were to work that career and then go home and then not express myself after, for example, I've lived alone for over a decade, and I would go back to work in that way, and I would continue to do this, it wouldn't be long before that subconscious or conscious, could be a little bit of both, pattern is so deeply ingrained in the energetic system affecting the physical that oneself, myself, would lose their connection to their authentic expression. Let me give another example, not of the voice, but of the body. This can even be a semi-positive thing. Semi-positive? Let me explain. So I practice a lot of yoga. And in yoga, as most of you will know, you move from posture to posture. But it's a very controlled and effortful art, yeah? You're moving in a very controlled way, and you're disciplining your body to be held in a certain posture with certain alignments. This prevents free and natural expression of the system, though it can certainly lead to greater capacity and expression of the system. When I go to dance, and I've done way too much yoga, it's hard for me to just let loose because I've practiced controlling my system. That's the nervous system program that I've been offering, yeah? So it can take me some time to dance. But if I'm not practicing so much yoga, maybe I'm rolling jujitsu, and it's a little bit more spontaneous in that I don't know what's going to happen, so I have to be a little bit more responsive and reactive. I'm still often using program patterns of movements, but there's more intuition. And say I'm going to a bunch of festivals and I'm dancing a lot. Well, I'll have so much more capacity for non-linear, unstructured movement, yeah? Not only in my body, but in my mind. My whole thought train will think different. Much more creative. I'll be much more connected with my intuition. And this is one of the important points to highlight in our expression. You could even say our soul's expression. From authentic, spontaneous movement of feeling, yeah? We get much more connected with our intuitive capacity rather than our, let's say, our linear way of thinking. So when I've been doing a lot of dance, like I'm primed to do some beautiful, creative, poetic writing. Not the kind of like prose of explaining like the I Ching Jing process of Qigong. I'm like so much more tapped into expressing some very saucy and spicy tantric sex poem like I usually write, right? That's the way. So coming back to the expression of the throat space, very similar. And very common, coming back to the why it's so common in our like a modern life, is because so many people don't have many environments when they can freely express. It's the same for dance, but I want to focus in on singing. Because most people work a 9 to 5 and they're playing a certain role, and it's been so conditioned for who knows how many years. And when they come home, to the degree that they're not comfortable to confidently express themselves, and let's talk a little bit about how we can express ourselves freely and openly, not playing a role, express our emotions, all of our emotions. This means expression of negative emotions. So many of us, myself included, have had a history of not feeling safe to express negative emotions, or perhaps as a masculine, as a male, not feeling safe to express negative emotions such as crying, to be perceived as weak. So much so that even on my own or with other people, it's a conditioning to work through to even allow myself to cry, which is one of those things. It's not so easy. It's not like I can just say, okay, I am ready to cry. Let the floods come down my eyes. Let me be so I don't know why I turned into more of a Terminator if I'm trying to cry, but that's the way it came out. That's the authenticity of that expression. You get the point, yeah? And then it's also about our truth, and there's like degrees of truth. I mean, like, it is true that I love apples. That's a truth. It is true that all is one. That's a bigger truth. And the bigger the truth, often the more controversial it is. Now, all is one, depending on how you speak to it and who you speak to, might not be the most controversial thing. But truth in relationships, speaking your truth about jealousy, speaking your truth about desires that may be triggering for the other partner, these kind of truths may not be expressed. These are all going to relate to the control of expression, yeah? So there's a lot of conditioning to work through around here, and there's a lot of development that is available. Going back to dance, for the last few months I've been dancing once a week at an ecstatic dance. This for me is enough to be like a pressure valve for the controlled movement so I don't become too robotic. It's enough to keep me sane, yeah? But there's so much more development there. There's so much more that I could continue to move in that way, and it would create more balance in my life, to be honest. Naturally, as spring and summer come, there's more opportunities for dance, and that balancing comes, and I feel in those months how much more balanced I am, and I'm excited for that to come around. Now, expression of truth through the voice, expression of emotions, this is something I'm working on a lot right now. I'm taking singing lessons, albeit very slowly. And I'm finding more opportunities, medicine song circles, and I do a monthly lodge and ceremony where I'm singing. I'm pushing that edge regularly, and just the other day I went and I walked around a park and I was singing to myself. And I broke through a nice layer, because ordinarily when I'm in public and I sing, I lose my voice. It's like the air in my lungs has been taken from me. It's like the depth of my capacity to speak from my balls completely uproots, and I'm just at the tip of my lips with the depth that I have within myself. And this is just complete fear, like a freeze response happening in my system. I could be in my vehicle singing confidently, openly, and loud, and then I open the door, and then it's like the air within me is pulled out. So I decided, no, I'm just gonna continue to sing, and I'm gonna sing whatever comes on. And some Disney songs came on, some expressive R&B came on, some prayer songs came on, and I decided just to continue to sing. And I felt layers washing away, and still more layers to wash away, but so much more expansion and openness. And something really beautiful happened is my voice connected deeply into my body, and I found that it was hard to just sing it. My body wanted to express. So when I was singing You Should Let Me Love You by Mario, an expressive R&B song, my body wanted to move to feel most confident. It's like instead of just quietly singing it, I felt more confident boldly singing it. I needed to go all in. I needed to just not edge the fear little by little, just needed to let it go completely. And another beautiful opening, most of my singing is done when I drive. I will continue to develop a practice of it throughout my life, which I'm doing more and more as I cook, etc. And just a practice of it on my own, of course. But a lot of it is when I drive because I have a lot of opportunity there. And the other day, I've been getting into playing an instrumental track and just free flow rapping. And the other day, I was driving for an hour, and for most of that trip, I put that rap track on, and I flowed the entire time without hesitation, constant rhymes coming through, kind of like glossolalia, speaking in tongues, to like expressive openings, all different voices and characters coming through, which represents something very, very deeply with me when I express, whether it's in acting or poetry. I feel as though many different personalities and energies come through me. This is most likely in tune with me being a reflector and not having a dominant energy. So there's a capacity to connect with many other different energies as they move through me. Not going to go too deeply into the reflector, but for those who know, they know. Very fascinating to have these energies come through. It feels like channeling different beings, yeah? But that, for me, represented one of in that particular way of singing, such a long period of singing without self-judgment. And I've done longer sings like that in kirtan and all kinds of things before. But in terms of rapping, where it's like I'm constantly offering words, like I'm creating song in that moment, in the moment. And it's not only continuing to come out, but it's continuing to come out in something that I would share confidently with others, that I would be happy to go on a stage and share because there's value and beauty in that. And I feel embodied in that expression. And it's not like the usual gripping of my voice where I'm expressing, but I'm not fully confident. So there's like an aspect of my energy holding that back, which is the control in the throat. And what happened after that, this is so key. My intuition was like on point. I knew what I needed to do when I needed to do it. And this is what I want to chat about now, is how important it is to develop that level of acting without hesitation. This goes not for our voice, but for our expression. It's for how we tell stories. Like there's many points in this podcast where I was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, I could have expressed that much better. That wasn't clear. I rambled there. I could start over. I could edit this. But I don't want to do that. I want to keep going I mean, there are times when I will do that because I'm sharing something to the public, but I want to keep going to release that conditioning that everything has to be perfect, right? And the more that I do that, I stop doubting myself and judging myself so much so that I can just be present with what is instead of losing myself to what just came before, which was one of the major blocks I've had in singing. As soon as I start singing, I would judge myself a little bit and then a little bit more, then a little bit more. And then I'm so much in my mind judging myself that I'm not actually present singing and it's lost all depth. Yeah. Maybe you can relate. The intuition comes when we are so present in the moment that, okay, let me back up. Intuition is immediate recognition. It's energetic before the mind and its conditioning has a chance to process that information and make sense of it, which then moves through the logical systems. It's a much later stage of development. Yeah. So if we can act on the intuitive faculties, they come before that whole process has taken place. We need to be without hesitation, so present in the moment, in that channeling, in that gamma state of brain. And one of the best practices for that is free speech. This could be simply glossolalia, speaking in tongues, supakabla, supakabla samoa. Just making noise, just like free movement, dancing in ecstatic dance. It relieves the chronic tensions and control patterns so that we can experience what it is like to move unabatedly, to express unabatedly without all the layers of conditioning that often, as I've expressed, become so built into the system at a subtle energetic level that they're subconscious, that we don't realize that we're so controlled and stressed until we do the dance, until we start singing, until we do breath work and we realize we don't even realize we can't let go. We've forgotten how to let go. So many people come to me in the breath work and they're like, I feel the tension in the throat, but I don't know how to let go. I tried to do this and I tried to do this, and I'm like, well, that's more control. The process of letting go of those deeper held tensions is actually, for the most part, and though there are some prescriptive pathways of meditations and breath work that you can do, much of it is just witnessing and allowing, feeling and experiencing those tensions, and over time, maintaining the correct qualities of mind, relaxation, ease, letting go, and allowing over time for them to release on their own. Not a method of will and control. This is why this topic is so resonant. This is why throat pattern control is so common in breathwork. This is why throat expression is so suppressed, as well as movement, because in the West, it's much more common for us to wear these masks, to have control of the system, to be doing many things, as I mentioned, that could be positive, yoga and working out. But there a certain control, we're exerting a will on the system of how it should look and how it should move. And this isn't the natural expression of allowing our system to go through its process, to move from emotions instead of the mind and its desires. Yeah. So it's a whole nother pathway of development, and what I'll offer is that our soul expresses itself through thoughts, feelings, and through our sensations. But there's a difference between emotions and thoughts that come from the ego and come from the soul. I don't really have a great way that you can easily distinguish, other than letting you know it's obvious when you know. So there's a difference in the depth. There's a difference in the flow of energy. And you'll know it when you know it. And the only way to know it is to to know both of them, and then to create the differentiation between how you feel those things. Because following your emotions could be taken to mean follow your anxiety driven desire for safety, to have a control pattern that gives your emotion some sense of numbing, which feels good. Or your soul can encourage you to follow a pathway which might be a little fear evoking because of the fear based conditioning, but is exciting, which can put you on a pathway of inspiration that drives your behavior to do something. And it could be the exact same thing. In both circumstances, it could mean going for a walk. But if it's driven from anxiety versus it's driven from the soul's desire to experience and express and to learn a lesson, completely different. And learning to express the soul is so key. And what's so common is the process of learning to unravel what is the conditioning of the impulses in the system that are driven by fear-based conditioning, anxiety, frustrations, etc. And what is the soul's, the legitimate soul's desire for experience. And when an individual does this, I can speak for myself, this is where healing, manifestation, regulation, and our embodiment comes from. So let's talk about a few of those things, yeah? Healing. So when I started to sing on my own, this is so much came up. I was stuttering because I'm overwhelmed by touching those memories. I can think of at least a dozen, like a slideshow memory reel of me singing at various different times and feeling like someone is like holding my tongue, like I can't express myself when I want to sing. Like it's I'm so glad that that level of contraction is not there in my system. And the amount of emotion that continued to pour forth. And for me, I'm someone who meditates and moves their body every day. And I'm like, for a while, I was like, why don't I sing every day? I had this nice intention of wanting to sing. I have many good reasons for singing. I would love to sing in a ceremony confidently. I would love to sing with my future partner. I would love to sing to my children. I would love to always have a tune in the back of my mind to carry me through, like a mantra to regulate my thought process, and to have a nice aura of melodious a melody about me because I'm all singing and it's in my vibration and people can feel that, and I'm humming as I walk and move through the world. That feels like a very beautiful way to be. So for so long I'm like, why can't I do it? I have discipline, but it's all that fear that repulses, like a magnet, pushes away. And as I continued to sing, there's just so much resistance. So I needed to double down in the same way that I needed to go all in to express myself in public. I needed to make commitments. I needed to take a singing lesson. I needed to look to the future at the ceremonies that I'd be holding and be like, this is gonna happen. You gotta move through this. You can do this. So this is so important, is to identify those fear-based beliefs so that they come out of the darkness, out from the shadows, and they can be brought to the light as an active process. And then that process can have a trajectory, and there can be a way of looking at it and going, okay, there's progress now. This is good. In Qigong, they have 6 healing sounds. They work primarily with the 5 element system from traditional Chinese medicine theory, and each of the organs has a sound that helps to purge. The basic formula for most Chinese energetic medicine practices is to purge any stagnant or turbid qi, any qi or bad energy, you could say, and then to tonify or to add in the appropriate amount of good qi or energy, and then to regulate. And imbalance in the body is because some areas are usually deficient, they don't have enough of the qi, or they have too much of the qi, they're excessive, or the qi is dysregulated, so it needs to be regulated, yeah? So at an energetic level, speaking directly to the organs, we want to check in with the organs. So the liver, for example, often needs a good detoxification, a good purging of it. Whereas something like the heart, there's less purging to do and is more tonifying, just as a generality, yeah? But in general, we follow that formula. We want to purge any excessive or stagnant or turbid qi. And one of the ways that we do this with the healing sounds is to make the appropriate sound for the organ. And there's a number of different sounds for each organ, but let's go with shu, shu, which represent the liver sound. And when I create that vibration, song is creating vibration, yeah? I can source that vibration from my liver, and I can vibrate my liver. Now, as I'm doing that, I'm breaking up energetic stagnation, and I'm releasing because I'm expressing my voice out. On the inhales, energy's coming in. On the exhales, energy's coming out, yeah? So as I'm making this sound, and there's a mudra and a hand positioning that helps to also purge the energies. Once I do that, then I bring my hands back to my organ and I breathe in, and this is offering in good energy. And what you will find if you do this, and there's still more to this process, but we're not going to go into great depth here, is that more and more an individual can center their attention like a spotlight on their organs and vibrate them, feel them, and to also add or breathe into them, harmonizing them. But in the Chinese system, it's not just about the organ, it's about the organ system. And the organ system has multiple levels. And one of the levels is to process emotions. And the emotions that are processed by the liver is frustration and anger and things of this nature. So, this is I explain this process as one of the pathways of healing. Now, this is a very prescriptive and targeted way of working with the body. It's very comprehensive and it's very exact, because if we're holding certain emotions, we can work on different organs, yeah? And just like I was expressing, it's like sometimes my voice is like I'm strangled and it doesn't want to express. That's because the negative emotion's there and it's guarded, and I'm not willing to feel it at that moment because maybe it came up in a time when it wasn't appropriate to feel or express. And there are those times, as we're adults, and sometimes suppression is part of regulation in society. Repression, not so good. A little suppression is advantageous, because if we just throw a tantrum every time that we get angry, we'll be like toddlers in the supermarket, yeah? Not so appropriate. But a little bit, and then taking care of ourselves when it is appropriate, I don't see that as a negative, yeah? Anyways, coming back to the suppression of our expression, when I'm willing to feel and I'm willing to make that sound, then it opens up and I can shift. I often don't experience that emotion, say it's anger, lifting in that moment, but it's not necessarily meant to be in that way because I'm working with the fundamental energy or chi there. What I often experience is a shift in the energy. The block begins to move. It's no longer just like suppressed emotion encapsulated and buried in the psychic armoring. It's then open, the energy is beginning to flow, and then I often experience the emotion, the anger or frustration later as it purges out through the system. Yeah. So me taking part in this healing sounds practice has been instrumental in learning to feel my body, because it's like, this is the pathway of healing I'm talking about. It's like I'm learning to express more and more deeply from my being, meaning as I learn to sing more and more, there are times when I am singing from my head, and I'm not just talking about head voice, chest voice, belly voice, or however these things are. It's like I want to express my whole being, my whole soul through every fiber and cell of my body in my voice. Because then I know that I'm total, I'm all in. So part of the healing journey of the voice and expression is to increase the embodiment of the consciousness of the soul that comes through the various layers of physical, emotional, and through the various sheaths of energy, so that we are centered. And the process of coming to our center, to our soul, is to move through all the layers of not self, the conditioning that are held at various levels in the tissues and the energetic layers of the body. And the journey of expression is to express those layers. That's what holds them there. For example, if I'm holding that anger, I can hold that potentially for my whole life, or at least until it gives me a tumor and I die. Yeah? Or I can express that emotion, I can detach from it, release it, honor its process and story, realizing it's not me, taking the lessons that it has for me in a positive way. And then that emotion is alchemized. It's no longer negative, it's positive because of the gifts it has given me. It simply is. I've expressed it, no longer attached to it, and now I have more space and depth within me to experience and express. And then as things go, deeper and deeper levels of emotion and anger continue to arise until one day just the beautiful shiny light from within remains. When I get there, I'll let you know. But that's the process of continuing to purge these old stories, in my understanding, this life and lives before. In non-linear time, all things happening at once. But in linear time, that's the story and experience. So this is why this is so important for our healing and our capacity. Like, one of the most beautiful things that has come from singing and learning to sing is when I'm around friends or partners, intimate partners in this way, that I can sing with them, that I can dance with them. I didn't have this in my last relationship, and it's so nice to be able to sing and dance and tell stories with other people, because it's the best way to regulate. I had a panic attack and mental breakdown, a whole kerfuffle of things, which I talked about in my last podcast, and I needed to learn how to self-regulate in a new way. All the old patterns, breathwork and yoga, were there. They were helping, but they weren't doing the trick. That's life. We have a set of tools, and it gives us challenges that are so beyond our set of tools that we got to get new tools. So singing was one of the things that worked for me. I would go into an anxietous, that's the word I'm using, anxietous state, a panic attack, and the only thing, or the thing that worked at that moment at least, was to sing, and I could self-regulate through singing. I actually I have like mantras and a prayer song playlist on Spotify. But one of the ones that helped me out is I made a playlist. I think I started about 2 years ago. And it was songs, it's called For My Love. It was songs that helped me to connect with my heart, that I would sing to attune me to having a future partner, like cultivating myself. And at first, the list was all these old songs from my teenage years that I couldn't express at the time. Yeah, because I wasn't able, I didn't get past my singing block till my late 20s. So I was a very emotional teenager, straight up emo. And I listened to all this very expressive music, but I never sang. I guess I might have at a few concerts. I shouldn't say I never sang, but I rarely sung the song, but I resonated with the emotion. That's what I wanted to express. That's why I was listening to it. So when I started to sing these unabatedly without hesitation, I started to purge all of that emotion from my childhood and from my teenage years. And it was like from all these breakups when I was younger, I wanted to express my emotions through these songs, but I wasn't able to. So as I went back and started singing all these songs, I started to release that emotion that had been suppressed since I was in my teenage years, which was times when I had loved and then I got hurt and my love had shifted since then because I've carried that hurt. When I started expressing all those emotions, I started to regain that love and empower the love. And I'm building back that love so that when I find that chosen partner, that I won't carry all that conditioning and I can give myself as best as I can and I can love her like I've never been hurt before. That's the all in. That's the all in there. So that's how the list started out, is all these older songs. But then as I started to carry this playlist and sing it, I started to add to it because at various points, as I started to work on the manifestation of my future partner, new songs would come along that would help me. They would trigger something in me, not from my conditioning, but from my soul. And then I realized that some of these songs weren't just for my partner, they were for my dad, and they were for my friends. And then I realized they were also for me. So this playlist became just songs, I could call it worldly songs, often not spiritual songs, that help me to connect with my heart. Help me to attune to me. And these have been a major source of my healing and self-regulation. For the years I've spent wearing masks, both in my physical expression of my face, of my voice, of my embodiment, to recalibrate to something that feels deep enough to call it home in the soul. Yeah, it's like I do have a fair amount of conditioning that I'm working through around spirituality and the personality, around spiritual traditions, which often I've received teachings in that are about like the highest level of them is the renunciate. The highest level of them is the individual who is not worldly anymore. Yeah, so there's a certain amount of conditioning and judgment on myself for the personality and the human life and desiring marriage and these kind of things, which is, this is what my soul wants to experience, so I have to surrender to that. I don't have to, I choose to. Yeah, so working with that, this very worldly playlist of mine is very special to me because in many circumstances it's much more powerful than all the other medicine music for me, because it's very emotional and I can put my whole self behind it and dance so totally in a way that a lot of spiritual music doesn't light me up in that same way, yeah? So it's very special to me. And as I dance to this music, it dances me. And what I mean by that is, as I sing certain songs from this playlist, I'm not dancing. This is something I learned in ecstatic dance. When I'm controlling, there's a differentiation here between me and my mind controlling and choosing what I want to do and allowing my body to express, resourcing myself at a whole different level. When I sing some of these songs, my body moves because of the vibration of energy, and it's not me. I'm not choosing, because I don't move in the ways that I move in those ways. You know what I mean? It's like coming from within, and the movements are so different. They're often so much more subtle because they're internally sourced, and it's like I'm being carried on clouds. And to the degree that I can let go, I see, and I understand how many great musicians, like, they wiggle on stage and they have their own, that's their soul expression. You can recognize that. You can recognize that in an individual when it's authentic or not. And to feel that, it's like it's a form of bliss. It's a form of heaven for sure. I mean, it's like an opening of heaven for sure. It's like a clear channel. Do you know what I mean? Let me pull together where we've gone so far and see if I can make some sense of myself here. So I've been speaking quite a bit about expression and how it's becoming more and more important for me to prioritize expression. And part of this, as I've expressed, has been due to spiritual conditioning that I've in some way chosen to collect. Let me make a differentiation here. This is something I've chatted about as soulality. It's a horrible name. I said I was going to change it, but I didn't change it. Soulality, we're still using it. Soulality versus spirituality. Another way, not an exact way, but another way of saying that is the medicine path and the spiritual path. So my understanding here, or the reason why I share this, is that for me, the spiritual path, like the traditional spiritual path, is to know the spirit, which is not the mind and the body. It's beyond that. So traditional spiritual paths are not about the personality. They're not about developing the ego. They're not about the expression of the individual. They're not about expressing emotions. They're about detachment. They're about having experiences, samadhis, the jhanas, and going into absorption states wherein the body's so still, unexpressed, that the consciousness, their consciousness, experiences nothing but the consciousness, pure consciousness, no form, non-rupa. Yeah? And that's you could say, the ultimate goal in the spiritual way, in the enlightenment traditions. Now I'm speaking generally about a vast amount of traditions, so there's not a lot of exactness to them, but that's the general orientation there. For the present purposes, I think it articulates that quite well, yeah? So the other way is the soul expresses itself through the vessel, the human vessel, through its thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And in a non-dual way, this is also what we could call the spiritual path, but when both paths are called the spiritual path, for me it's confusing. So I create distinction. This is more the path of the soul manifesting into embodiment. And the soul desires to have experiences such as marriage and children. And instead of transcending the body and the mind and the planet, it aims to live harmoniously in the cycles. This to me represents more of the medicine path, such as the indigenous wisdom keepers, such as the plant medicine paths, which in my experience with them, are less about transcending all that is human, and rather about being a part of the sacred circle, being a part of the cycles and the seasons. And this form of soul, spiritual path, however we articulate it, has much more of an integration of the expression. If you listen to a lot of like Buddhist mantras, there's not a lot of emotion being expressed in them. It's very, I don't want to say monotone, but there's a whole different level than if you listen to medicine music, which is very much from the heart, which is very impactful on a very human level, yeah? So that's my distinction there. And I'm an individual who I would articulate walks both pathways. And this has been part of my healing in recent times because I've walked both pathways, but there's still a lot of conditioning because many people that I interact with are one or the other. So when I hang out with people who are more on the Buddhist path, they're not so interested in the plant medicine path, and so much so with the plant medicine. Yeah, you see all these, and I've in my own way internalized some of this, and I'm working through it. For example, in order to reach depth of meditation, like the jhanas, like the samadhi and the levels of samadhi, it takes a lot of practice and concentration without distraction. I'm not saying that can't be done in a family or a household or pathway, but much less likely. And the heights of those practices, much less likely, because it's a function of time. You know, some of these individuals, they don't have families, and they spend next to all of their time practicing these ways. So there's a certain height that won't be reached. Is that necessary for any individual's path in each respective life? No. But there's a certain amount of, in my understanding, or in my internalized conditioning, judgment that I'll never reach those, which touches back into the, will I be good enough? Is my life good enough if I don't reach those? And am I selfish to have a family which is all of Maya, right? The illusory is not real. It's all going to fade. So why would I invest myself in the finite when the infinite is real? I should detach myself, yeah? So there's a little window into what I've been deconditioning, because there's a strong pulse within me that says, I want to be a father, and I want to be a grandfather, and I want to sing to my children. And to me, though I still can go back and forth, this is stronger because when I'm in ceremony, when I'm in a very aligned and clear state, this is what rings true. When I'm out of that state, my doubts and fears are there because I'm still working through them. And when I had my mental breakdown several months ago, some of the things that pulled me through, some of the things that gave me strength to keep going beyond my own strength, I'd reached the limits of my mind, the conditioning, the childish behaviors. I needed to pull myself through by connecting with strength. And the idea of my children was something that pulled me through. So that was just my own clear guidance of that, which is helping me to sort out everything in my life, because it's a motivational mechanism and it's a organizing principle for my behaviors, yeah? And this is one of the reasons why I'm stepping more deeply and more boldly into these areas of embodiment and expression, because in the last 10 years of my spiritual career, if we'll call it that, I've been mostly, there's a lot of ceremonial and plant medicine influence, but the majority of my day-to-day daily practices are more spiritual based as opposed to soul based, meaning meditation and control and yoga and these kind of things, without the expression of emotion, without this rooting in this other pathway, which is more integrative, which is more ceremonial, which is, I've slowly over time moved more and more away. And I don't want to give people a misunderstanding, because I still have a lot of that. And as many people know, I still work with many different medicine traditions. But the vast amount of my time is still in the spiritual process and practice, yeah? So that was all a side note about soul expression. Coming back to the like where we left off and what we've all chatted about so far, is that our expression, like how I'm finding clarity, is because I'm expressing. And as I express, I know my truth. Because if it's just in my mind, no bueno. It's hard to know, because mind doesn't have the salience that when it comes through the mind into the emotions and expressed through the body, it's got a flavor, it's got a ring to it. It's like when you express your gratitude out loud, you know if you're really gratitude when you're willing to feel it. If I go, thank you for my life and my food and my water, I'm not really paying attention, not really grateful. Versus if I take a moment to be like, wow, thank you for my food. Thank you for my water. And even then, I just touched the surface of it. If I repeated that over and over and over and maybe sung a song about gratitude, then it would create some depth, because it can take some cultivation to actually build gratitude in the system, yeah? It takes a pause to reflect on all that we have. And by continuing to work with the voice through song, through dance, it's one of the most powerful ways to give gratitude and to feel what we actually feel. Another thing about the children, I went through a 30-day process of writing about having children. It wasn't just writing. I did a number of different practices around that. And one is just to speak it, just to feel my own truth. I connect with my heart, and I say simple things like, my name is Aya. Yeah, that rings true. My name is Bob. Yeah, that don't feel so right. My name ain't Bob. And then I'm like, do I want children? Do I not want children? Sometimes I gotta be careful in how I express things, because when I express things in the negative, it creates a little bit of that. So I express it in different ways, and I feel into it. Another way I do this, if I have a big decision, I dance on it. For a few years ago, I was considering moving to Bali. I was living in Squamish, and I was like, that sounds exciting. So I would go, I'm going to Bali. And then I would start dancing. And there was so much excitement. I was like, ooh, that feels good. That feels good. And I was like, okay, I'm going to live in Squamish. Ooh, let me dance this one out. And whatever one had more excitement, then I was like, that's the way. So I was feeling by expressing, and this was giving me my guidance. But it was only because I had a space to do so freely. Yeah, and I had cultivated these practices that it became most potent. Now the more I dance and I sing, there's so much more guidance, and I have so much more connection to my center. That's the way. So there's so much healing available. There's so much guidance available. There's so much regulation available, and embodiment. As I step forward as a holistic energy medicine practitioner, holistic alignment and men's work coach, so many labels, yeah. And part of the process there for me in stepping to the next level is, am I ready? Do I deserve it? Do I know myself as that person? Like when I first started as a breath worker and yogi, I had done it for a little while. So I had some level of repetition of it in my system, that there was a degree of embodiment of it, yeah? It's like our cells are always being, they're dying and coming back. What do you call that process? Life? That's the one. They're always going through the life process, continually dying, and then new cells are being born. So degrees of embodiment is like, I've been practicing meditation for 10 years. There's a certain degree of embodiment in that. I've been practicing badminton for a few years in high school, and I haven't touched it since. So I'm not a very embodied badminton player. But meditation and yoga, most people can tell that I meditate or do yoga when they just see me. They just catch a vibe, or they see something about me. Because there's an embodiment. It's in my energy. It's in my aura, yeah? So the next level for me in embodiment is, am I that person? So there's a doubling down. For example, in the last several months, almost every weekend, I've done 5 to 10 hours of yoga or meditation practice. Usually hot yoga. That's been my kick recently. So I have a high degree of yoga in my system right now. It's very much built in my system. I practice it several days a week and integrate it in with my dance and other movement practices too. But a lot of yoga in my system, yeah? So I feel confident to step into the next level of teaching yoga because I am that being. It's just who I am. It's not something I'm trying to do. I'm not faking it till I make it. I've just entered into a new level of that integrated into my system, yeah? So this doesn't have to be in a particular way of skill. What I want to express here is a certain level of your soul's embodiment in your being. Think of your soul as the spirit, the consciousness that integrates it into the body-mind complex. Your experience of your expression, like just your talking voice, your singing voice, your being, your expression of your emotions as they arise authentically. This is part of your being. This is, for me, this is your purpose, is to be. Your mission is what you do in life. I empower individuals to optimize and harmonize their energy and live their dharma. My purpose is just to be, to actually allow the emotions, the energies that flow through me to flow through me in as best as I can, unabated, without hesitation, so that they're clear, that I'm a clear channel, that I don't distort them with my conditioning to the degree that I hold fear and other things in my system. This will do that, yeah? So that's not such an easy job necessarily. I mean, it's the easiest thing in the world because, you know how belief systems work, right? You don't want to say it's a hard thing to do because it actually is easy, but it might appear hard at first until you start to do it, and then it will be easy, yeah? So this is so important for our embodiment, is to express ourselves freely. And it's deep work. And it continues to be deep. And as we continue to do the work, there'll be more and more stages and edges for us to speak our truth at a greater level. And speaking our truth is not such an easy thing. Individuals who speak their truth boldly throughout history have been put on crosses and hung in all manner of torture. Because when you speak your truth and other individuals aren't willing to see and feel that truth, then there can be a lot of resistance. But ultimately our truth is our truth. And just as I mentioned, in as best as we can, expressing that unabatedly without hesitation is the path. I don't know if that's the spiritual path, the soul path, but that's the path for me. So I'm learning how to express my emotions, to communicate honestly, openly, authentically, to create the spaces where it's safe to do so, where it's appropriate to do so at greater and greater levels. Because I recognize there are times when to express, time to be still, time to be loud, the appropriateness. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with there being a certain level of appropriateness. It's not that everything should be free to come out at all times. There are times when you should hold your fart in. Don't just fart all the time. Right? That's just for me, to hold space well. If someone's going through something, a death of a loved one, it might be that, it's a case-by-case basis. It might be the appropriate time to fart, but maybe you should just hold that in for a little bit, yeah? Just for a little bit, not forever. And it's time. It's time for myself. I hesitated there. It is time for myself to work through the I'm good enough story. because it's not for me anymore. And this is one of the beautiful things about knowing that children are on the way. And they're not on the way very soon, is what I'm calling it. But they're on the way. And the foresight of that is it's not about me. It's one of the most relieving parts about Dharma is just me acting in accordance with me. My authenticity is enough. It's not about the doing of all the things that are to come, that have come and will come. I said that twice, but it's about acting from my center in the moment. And, it is about me because it's my soul and I'm experiencing this incarnation as a being, and it's going to be the most special thing for me. It's my full fulfillment of this life. But my purpose, or my dharma, my mission would be the more accurate way of saying it. My mission is not about me because it's to serve the all. And I'm, yes, serving myself in this process. But it's ultimately so much more about my family and my children and the parts of me which are, in the big picture, so much more of me than just the individual, yeah? So my service in my mission is to offer myself fully, which is my full fulfillment as an individual to the collective, yeah? And part of that for me, these are the edges I'm moving more and more into, is more comedy. I don't know what that looks like at this point. It's not one of the higher priorities. Maybe it's just like integrating more of the aspect of me that is humorous, because I've shown up in many ways online and in many other circles with a certain seriousness. We'll get into that whole story and that whole piece there, but that's another piece, a lot of pieces that are coming forth to the light. More poetry, more singing, more acting, more dancing. I've recognized myself to desire at this stage in my life to move away, or integrate more of would be a better way to say, more of who I am, referring back to being a writer and a meditator and an introvert. I'm not either one of those things. I'm introverted, I'm extroverted. I'm a writer, I'm a dancer. So there's a greater harmonization and balance. And since we're going on it, more balance between the soul and the spiritual path, as I've articulated it earlier. And I don't know what it's like for you, because we all have a very unique story with our voice and our expression. Maybe you are a radiant singer, and it's more your body and dance. Or maybe there's certain aspects of sharing your emotions that are more salient to work on at this time. Maybe it's telling stories. Maybe it's writing those stories. Maybe it's telling jokes, telling wisdom stories. I mean, the amount of expression on our planet, it's so beautiful. Like, as beautiful as all the beings that we share our planet with, the two-legged and the four-legged, the amount of expression of the uniqueness, because each individual is unique. There's no way to compare one soul to another in its expression. No matter how like or dislike they are, everyone is so unique. And through expressing our uniqueness, we will find ourselves in our path. And I feel that for myself. I feel many of my blocks being released. Not just within myself and my expression, that's where it starts. But as I allow those boundaries is not the best word, those blocks within myself to release, I see the expansion in my own mind of what is possible because of how I've been limiting myself. And I walk into many different environments, for example, from last year to this year, and I see so much more potential and possibility of how I can show up in those environments that feels more at home with me, where I can give and receive more love, where I can express my truth and I can serve my mission. And that's just the way. It's like I've chosen this mission of public speaking, of singing in front of people, because it's all my biggest triggers. And that's what I came to work on in this life. So I encourage you, if you have identified these triggers or if you haven't, to make a concerted effort, however that looks for you, If you want any support on this, please reach out to myself or many other people offering services and expression. And this could be singing, this could be breath work. There are so many different embodiment practices and well-embodied humans sharing this work in the world, and we're all offering this as an example, as a living example of what could be for one another. So my prayer is that you take some inspiration from this podcast that will help you on your path. And maybe we can dance and sing together, freestyle rap, whatever the moment calls for. I appreciate you listening. All my relations.